The Art, Politics, and Science of Coincidence. How Politicians, Scientists, and Some Husbands Leverage Coincidence by Tom Seast. Do nothing. No one wakes up in the morning and says to themselves, I want to get nothing done today. No one wants to be known as a do-nothing, except for on those off days when we want to do nothing. Catalyst for change. Most of us would like to be the cause for change, the person who makes change happen. But this is not always the case, and it can be difficult to tell if our actions are the catalyst for change. Coincidence. If I am running around a car, and I'm running around it 20 times, and the car catches fire while I'm running around it, did my running around the car cause it to catch fire? Was it pure coincidence that the fire started while I was running around the car? Or did the friction from my running cause the fire? Cause and effect. Sometimes it's easy to determine cause and effect. As an example, if my wife is sitting reading a book and I interrupt her reading by asking her to make me coffee, it is likely that I am the reason she isn't happy at that moment in time. It is obvious that I am the cause of her unhappiness. Not that I'd ever make my wife unhappy, because I am her angel bunny. Not so clear. Sometimes it isn't quite so clear as to cause and effect. As in my previous example, how do I know if something my wife was reading in that book had already made her unhappy? It is also possible that she is just an unhappy person due to other circumstances. If she was already unhappy when I asked her to make me coffee, and it is an inconvenience to her, it will likely just make her even more unhappy. Not that my wife is ever unhappy or unhappy with me. Good times and bad. As with all marriages, I tend to take credit when my wife and I are happy, and I tend to avoid taking responsibility for when my wife and I are unhappy. When she is happy, obviously, it is something I did to or for her that made her happy. But when she is unhappy, it is quite apparent that it must be something else or somebody else that caused her unhappiness, because that's just the way it is. It's my fault. Most of the time, it's my fault. Since I spend much of my time around my wife, I have a more significant impact on her life and happiness. So I'm usually responsible for some, if not all, of her mood changes. So, even though I am her angel bunny, I can be the cause and effect for some of her moods. Political cause and effect. Politicians are notorious for taking credit when things are going well and disclaiming responsibility when things are going poorly. They will take credit for anything that goes great. How often have you heard a politician say that something was their fault? How often do they take credit for bad times as well as good? They seem to be experts on doing good things and never doing bad things. Win-win. In business, most marketing efforts are aimed at producing materials that describe win-win situations where both the business and their clients and customers win from the exchange of goods and services. Companies have to deliver value in their products and services, or competing companies will spring up and replace those companies, because there is competition. Most business relationships are based on situations where all parties in the relationship benefit from the exchange of goods and services. Good and bad. Most political relationships or actions have a good and a bad effect on different parties. While political activities and relationships might benefit one person or one group of people, they often cause dire harm to a different group of people. Usually, the politicians will only take credit for the benefits provided, but not for the harm they cause the other people. Political winds. Quite often, politicians will observe the political winds, or how society is deciding to act in the face of current circumstances, and then the politician will jump on the bandwagon and claim credit for the improvement of circumstances. So they often spend their time observing how large groups of people are acting, and then adopt a strategy to enforce or enact legislation that will allow them to take credit for something that is already happening. Political example. The history of safer automobiles is an example of political adoption of regulation or legislation for the purpose of claiming credit for good things. Back when cars were first created, many people died in car accidents when the cars collided with objects on the road or around the streets or other vehicles. Car manufacturers started to adopt strategies in the design of the equipment, including things like collision engineering, safety belts, and other design considerations to keep the passengers safe. Once these practices and equipment were available, politicians quickly enacted legislation to require these safety features in cars. Then, the politicians took credit for making safer cars. Scientific discovery. Scientific discovery is a complex process which is subject to the same difficulty in assigning cause and effect or discovering cause and effect. If I create a solution to a scientific problem, how can I be sure that my engineered solution improved the circumstances or caused harm? Much time is invested in designing tests, studies, trials, and hypotheses when creating medicines and therapies because they have the potential to do so much harm or provide so much benefit to the human body. Solution or problem. With science, it can often be difficult to determine whether the solution came first and then the problem, or the problems came about and the solutions were developed later. Much time is invested in analyzing the benefits of a particular solution and cataloging them in case future problems come about that require a similar solution. The method of action for various solutions can be important in determining how the solution can provide benefits in future scenarios. The future of coincidence. I don't believe that it is any coincidence that many things aren't really solutions to problems, and that the solution just happened at the same time or coincided with another solution. It is difficult to determine the actual cause and effect in unisolated conditions. Me. I hope I have done a good job in making you aware of how so many things can just be the result of coincidence. Now, when evaluating solutions to problems, you can spend some time evaluating if they just benefit from coincidence. Feel free to follow my ramblings of coincidence at the links listed below.